In the tranquil wilderness of a distant monastery, a small flame flickers on an ancient oil lamp. A young monk sits across from an aged master, his curious eyes brimming with questions. The world outside races in chaos, but here, stillness reigns. What separates the enlightened from the ordinary? The answer lies in 7 tales that unfold the timeless truths of life. In the heart of the mountains, surrounded by mist and whispers of ancient wisdom, stood a secluded monastery. Within its stone walls, a young monk carried out his daily tasks with a mix of diligence and silent frustration. His days were repetitive, chopping wood, carrying water, preparing meals. To him, it all felt mundane, a never-ending cycle of labor with no deeper meaning. One evening, as the golden rays of the setting sun cast long shadows across the courtyard, the young monk approached the venerable master. The elder was seated under an ancient pine tree, his presence calm yet commanding, as though he were a part of the mountain itself. "Master," the young monk began hesitantly, his voice tinged with curiosity and a hint of weariness. "What is the difference between life before enlightenment and life after enlightenment?" The master closed his eyes briefly, as if to gather the weight of the universe in his thoughts, and then opened them with a gentle smile. "Before enlightenment, I chop wood, carry water, and cook. After enlightenment, I chop wood, carry water, and cook." The young monk blinked, his brow furrowing in confusion. "But, master," he pressed, "if nothing changes, then what is the point of enlightenment?" The master's smile deepened, and he gestured to the axe leaning against the tree. "Before enlightenment, I chop wood with the thought of the fire it will build. Each swing of the axe is heavy, burdened by the future it must create. But after enlightenment, I chop wood simply to chop wood. Each swing is light, free from the chains of expectation." The young monk listened intently, yet the answer left him unsatisfied. He looked to the sky, where the first stars began to appear, and asked, "But doesn't enlightenment bring great change, a transformation of life itself?" The master chuckled softly, the sound blending with the rustling leaves. "Life does not change, my child. What changes is how you live it. Before enlightenment, the mountain is a task to conquer, a challenge to endure. Each step is weighed down by the purpose of reaching the summit. But after enlightenment, the mountain simply is. Each step becomes a joy, each breath a gift, each view along the way a treasure to behold." The young monk's gaze fell to the path he had walked countless times, now illuminated by the moonlight. Suddenly, he realized how little he had noticed the vibrant flowers, the whispering trees, or the songs of birds that had accompanied him daily. The master continued, his voice as steady as the flowing stream nearby. "Most people live their lives like climbers, my child. They ascend the mountain of success, driven by goals, wealth, status, and recognition. Each achievement leads only to another climb, another summit, another exhausting effort. They miss the beauty of the journey because their eyes are fixed only on the peak. Enlightenment is not the summit. It is the ability to see the beauty of every step along the way." The young monk knelt before the master, the weight of his thoughts now lighter. "Master," he said softly, "does this mean life will always be filled with labor, and only our perspective can change it?" The master reached out and touched the monk's shoulder gently. "Labor is inevitable, but suffering is optional. When you chop wood with joy, the wood itself seems lighter. When you carry water with gratitude, its weight becomes a blessing. When you cook with love, each meal nourishes not only the body, but also the soul. Enlightenment does not remove the tasks of life, it transforms them into acts of living." Under the vast expanse of the star-filled sky, the young monk remained silent, his heart swelling with a new understanding. In that quiet moment, he glimpsed the first spark of enlightenment, a seed planted by his master's words, ready to grow with each step he took on his own journey. In a quiet grove on the edge of the forest, Zhuangzi walked alongside his young disciples. The crisp morning air carried the scent of pine and earth, and the faint sound of woodcutters echoed in the distance. The disciples were eager for answers to the questions that lingered in their minds. "Master," one of them asked, "how should we navigate society? How can we stand firm without losing ourselves in the currents of the world?" Zhuangzi, known for his cryptic wisdom, simply smiled and motioned for them to follow him deeper into the forest. As they climbed a winding path, they soon came across a group of woodcutters hard at work. With rhythmic swings of their axes, the men felled tall, straight trees that reached high into the sky. "Look closely," Zhuangzi instructed. "What do you notice about the trees they cut?" The disciples observed carefully. One of them answered, "They choose the tall, straight ones, the useful ones." Zhuangzi nodded, then pointed to a large, twisted tree standing untouched by the workers. Its branches curled in odd directions, and its bark seemed rough and uneven. "Why do you think no one cuts down that tree?" he asked. Curious, one of the disciples approached a woodcutter and posed the question. The man glanced at the gnarled tree and replied, "That tree is useless. Its wood is too crooked for building, its grain too uneven for carving, and its scent too foul for any practical purpose. It's worthless." Zhuangzi smiled as the disciple returned, then turned to the group and said, "The straight and useful trees are taken, but the crooked and useless ones remain standing. In their imperfection, they find safety." The disciples exchanged glances, their thoughts stirring. "But Master," another disciple asked, "does this mean we should be useless to avoid harm?" Zhuangzi shook his head and gestured for them to follow. As they climbed further, they came upon a small farmhouse nestled in the hills. In the yard, a flock of geese wandered freely, their honks breaking the forest stillness. The farmer greeted them warmly and invited them to stay for a meal. As he prepared dinner, the disciples watched him chase the geese, trying to catch one for the pot. The scene was chaotic. Feathers flew, and the geese scattered in all directions. One goose, however, stood calmly at the edge of the yard, unbothered by the commotion. Its presence exuded a quiet dignity, and it neither fled nor cried out. To the disciples' surprise, the farmer spared this goose and instead captured one of the others. "Why did you leave that goose alone?" a disciple asked. The farmer chuckled. "That one is special. It sings beautifully, like a river flowing through the mountains. I couldn't bear to kill it." Zhuangzi turned to his disciples, his expression thoughtful. "What have you learned from this?" he asked. One of the disciples quickly replied, "It seems that those without talent are expendable, but those with talent are cherished." Zhuangzi laughed softly. "You've only grasped part of the truth. Earlier, you saw that useful trees are cut down, while useless ones are left standing. Now, you see that talented geese are spared, while ordinary ones are sacrificed. Do you not see the contradiction?" The disciples fell silent, grappling with the paradox. Zhuangzi continued, his voice steady and calm. "The key is not in being useful or useless, talented or ordinary. The key is in understanding the nature of the world and adapting to it. Like the dragon that soars when storms rage and the snake that hides when droughts come. One must know when to shine and when to retreat." He paused, letting his words sink in. "When you encounter leaders who value talent, show your abilities. But when faced with those who envy and suppress talent, hide it. Wisdom lies not in being one or the other, but in knowing when to be either." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the hills, the disciples reflected on Zhuangzi's words. They realized that the path to navigating society lay not in rigid rules, but in the fluidity of wisdom, an understanding that strength comes not from resistance, but from adaptation. On a calm and misty river, the water mirrored the early morning sky, a palette of soft grays and blues. A man paddled his small boat with steady strokes, his thoughts preoccupied with the troubles of the day. The air was tranquil, interrupted only by the rhythmic splash of the oars. As he rowed, he noticed another boat drifting toward him from upstream. It seemed to be heading straight for his path. Startled, he shouted, "Move aside! Watch where you're going!" His voice echoed across the water, but there was no response. Frustration turned to anger. He shouted again, louder this time, "Are you deaf? Get out of the way!" His words were sharp, laced with fury. The boat continued its silent drift, undeterred. Finally, the boats collided with a soft thud. The man leapt to his feet, ready to unleash his full wrath upon the careless rower. But as he peered into the other boat, his rage evaporated in an instant. The boat was empty, its rudderless course a product of the current, not human error. In that moment, the man felt a profound stillness wash over him, as if the river itself had whispered a lesson into his heart. His anger had been real, but it had no target. It had arisen from his own assumptions, his own expectations of another. He sat back down in his boat, the tension in his shoulders easing. A thought emerged, clear and undeniable. Anger is not born from what others do, but from the stories we tell ourselves about their actions. If there is no one to blame, the anger dissolves. The river continued to flow, indifferent to his revelation. But the man's perspective had shifted. He began to notice the gentle ripples on the surface of the water, the distant call of birds, the serenity of the morning. What had been an ordinary journey moments before now felt like a gift. This tale reminds us of the power of perception. The world is full of empty boats, situations we misinterpret, actions we assign intent to without understanding. When we recognize this, we liberate ourselves from unnecessary suffering. Anger, like the mist on the river, can dissipate when we see things as they truly are, neither good nor bad, but simply as they exist. As the man paddled on, his strokes lighter now, he carried with him a newfound wisdom. When we let go of judgment, life becomes as peaceful as a still morning on the river. These 7 tales, woven across time and wisdom, remind us that enlightenment is not an escape from life's complexities, but a deep understanding of them. Whether it's the beauty of the present moment, the paradox of talent, or the serenity of acceptance, each story invites us to see the world and ourselves through new eyes. Perhaps in their reflection, we too may find the spark of awakening.